Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most complex source material and really try to pull out the clearest knowledge nuggets for you, our dedicated learner.
And yeah, we're really excited to start by saying this deep dive, it's being distributed completely free of charge, all major platforms, purely for educational purposes. We really want these ideas out there.
Absolutely. So today we're strapping in because this session, it really starts to dismantle our basic default settings for reality. We're diving deep into session 1 of the early sessions, book 20 of Seth Material. This one was recorded way back Wednesday, January 29th, 1964, 9 p.m.
And just as a reminder, this material, this whole amazing framework we explore, it comes from the Seth Material and the publisher New Awareness Network. Seriously, if this stuff grabs you, we really encourage you to get the books, study them directly. Check out their bookstore too. It's at https://sethcenter.com/Logie Sessions. Really dive in yourself.
Yeah, you really need to. Our mission today is pretty crucial. Seth is giving us this step-by-step breakdown of the inner senses. But to even get there, he first has to systematically show us that the reality we just assume is real-time, space, solid objects. It's actually just a carefully built cosmic illusion. He calls it the camouflage pattern.
Right, the camouflage. And what really jumps out right from the notes on this session is the vibe, the tone. It is mentioned Seth was being deliberately slow, very methodical, really patient. Jane Roberts, or Rubert, as Seth calls her, she actually felt this intense stage fright, a feeling of apprehension and wonder, even though she felt like she didn't have an idea in her head right before it started.
Yeah.
So Seth wasn't rushing this at all. He was clearly aiming for absolute clarity.
I just love that you've got this entity dealing with, non-local consciousness, timeless existence, deciding, okay, let's take this nice and slow. Like he's teaching quantum physics to some really smart 5-year-olds or something. It sets this fantastic, almost charmingly serious mood, doesn't it?
It really does. It
Yeah.
kind of grounds everything before they just launch into these concepts that really can bend your mind. And it starts with this surprisingly personal and funny warm-up.
Exactly. Seth kicks off the session by noticing the room, their surroundings, which is always a bit jarring when you're about to talk about the soul's mechanics, Rob asks him, "How are you, Seth?" And Seth just casually replies, "Just dandy."
Just Andy. And then, like you said, he suddenly becomes this cosmic fashion critic. He says, "Isn't it nice to see Jane in skirts for a change? I also like the hairdo." He's totally plugged into their physical, right-now reality. He even congratulates Jane on quitting smoking, adding, "as I predicted that she would."
It's brilliant. That opening just shows that this guide, this source, isn't some detached, dusty old spirit. He's right there, aware of their daily stuff. And that awareness, that integration, it actually provides the perfect jumping-off point for the first big technical idea, mental enzymes.
Right. Because if we're going to talk about inner senses, we first need to grasp the mechanism that translates that inner reality into, physical action or effect. Seth states very clearly that these mental enzymes belong to the mind, specifically, not the physical brain. But, and this is key, they operate through both.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. Why draw that line between mind and brain so sharply? If the enzymes are mental, why do they need the physical body at all?
Well, they need the physical body because, as Seth puts it, they use its chemical properties in their operation. Think of the mind as maybe the conscious architect holding the blueprint. It holds the intention, the core vitality. The enzymes, then, are like the mind's molecular agents on the ground.
Ah, okay.
They take that mental blueprint, that intention, and they use the body's resources, its neurochemistry, hormones, its basic physical structure, to actually manifest or translate that inner impulse onto the physical plane.
So if the mind is what determines health or structure or activity, then the mental enzymes are the chemical workforce carrying out those mental orders within the body itself. That really does challenge the whole biological determinism idea, doesn't it? It suggests chemistry follows consciousness, not the other way around.
That's exactly the core implication. It's the crucial bridge concept here. It stops us from falling into that easy trap of thinking the mind is just something the brain does, like an afterthought. No, here, the mind is the source, uncamouflaged, and these enzymes are its field operators working within that camouflage framework.
And speaking of that camouflage framework, this brings us right to that really weird paradox about our outer senses. Seth makes this incredibly bold claim right near the start. Our standard senses, sight, sound, smell, touch. They deal exclusively with the camouflage pattern.
That's their fundamental limit. These senses are basically designed only to interact with this agreed-upon illusion of, 3 dimensions, linear time, physical reality. And yet, Even with that limitation, Seth points out how truly marvelous they are in their function.
See, this is where I kind of want to push back on the source material just a little. If they only deal with the illusion, why call them marvelous? If they're fundamentally flawed, in a way blind to the inner reality, why praise them?
He praises their reach, I think, precisely because they're such incredibly successful tools for navigating within the camouflage. He says sight and sound actually carry you further ahead in what you think of as space than your physical body may be at any particular time. They are masters at conquering distance, which is obviously essential for survival in a space-time setup.
Okay, that makes more sense. They're beautifully engineered tools, but engineered for external use only. It's like they create this engineered ignorance of the machine they're attached to.
Exactly. Think about that internal blind spot he mentions. Your ears, they're physically inside your head, right? Yet they ordinarily hear sounds outside the body more readily than sounds inside the body itself. And your eyes, arguably, are most sophisticated sensors they cannot see within the body.
Yeah, if you were designing, say, a spaceship, you wouldn't build a windshield that could see Mars perfectly, but was completely blacked out when looking at the engine room controls. It feels like a deliberate exclusion. Like the universe or whatever designed this system wanted the physical organism to focus entirely on the external, the threat, the food, the path ahead, and just ignore the foundational, vital inner data stream.
Well, it almost has to be that way for the camouflage pattern to hold up, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if your outer senses could simultaneously perceive your body's swirling molecular structure or the energy fields holding it together. That illusion of solid separateness, of linear time, the very things needed for physical survival games, it would just dissolve.
Wow.
The restriction seems necessary for this particular game of physical life to even happen.
That nicely sets up the unique case of touch, then. Sight, smell, sound, they're the distance specialists. Touch is the odd one out.
Right. Touch relies heavily, almost entirely, on immediacy. As Seth says, it usually involves contact of a direct sort. Sure, you can feel wind or heat radiating, but true tactile sensation usually needs contact. Unlike your sight, which can span miles, touch requires the subject and the object to be pretty much in the same place at the same time.
And why is that distinction so crucial for what comes next?
Seth really flags this. He stresses that this quality of immediacy is the key idea we need to grasp and hold on to. Why? Because the inner senses share that exact quality of direct, instantaneous perception. But, and this is the mind blower, they achieve it without needing any physical contact.
Yeah.
Physical touch is the closest analogy we have in the outer world to how inner perception feels or operates.
Okay, right. So we've established the outer senses are kind of like specialized illusion navigators. They maintain the camouflage. Now, let's flip that switch. Let's talk about dissecting the uncamouflaged reality itself. This is where the inner senses come into play.
Exactly. The inner senses, their job is to deal with the realities beneath camouflage patterns. They aren't bound by the rules of external linear navigation. And, crucially, Seth states they are thoroughly capable of seeing the inside of the body. No blind spots there.
So the body itself is a camouflage pattern, but then Seth gives it this dual role. He also calls it a transformer. What's that about?
Yeah, it's like a converter. It takes what he calls the vital inner stuff of the universe, which you can think of as this high-level, unconstrained, simultaneous energy or consciousness. And it enables that stuff to operate under new and various conditions. Think of like a radio receiver, maybe. The airwaves are full of signals, right? That's the vital stuff. But the radio, the receiver that's the body, it takes that huge range of frequencies and converts it into a very restricted, specific, audible sound. That's the physical manifestation.
Okay. So the body restricts and focuses this vast vitality into a manageable physical experience, like tuning the dial.
That's a great way to put it. It makes physical experience possible by limiting the input. Now, how does the data flow? If the body's the transformer, who's receiving the signal, and how does it all get processed?
Good question.
The mind is the primary receiving station. Seth says the mind is inherently uncamouflaged. It's the highest operational level of consciousness in this model, and it directly receives the data brought in by the inner senses. This is the data representing the true, unfiltered structure of reality.
And the brain. The poor brain seems to always get demoted in Seth's worldview.
Yeah, the brain has a specific important job, but it's not the boss. It's more like the administrator for the physical camouflage pattern. So the inner data hits the mind first. But if any piece of that inner data is important for the body's necessary interactions with the outer world, things like survival instincts, coordinating physical movements, spatial awareness, that specific Relevant data gets forwarded to the brain.
Okay, so the mind gets the full, unedited director's cut of inner reality, but the brain only gets the Cliff's Notes version needed for navigating the physical day-to-day.
That's a perfect analogy, precisely. And the crucial link between these two systems, the bridge between mind and brain, between inner and outer senses, is what we usually call the subconscious.
Yeah.
Seth rebrands it, though. He calls it the connective.
This connective, the subconscious. It sounds like it's not just in your head, it's geographically complex almost, like it exists between realities.
Yes, exactly. He says it is actually partly on your plane and partly on other planes. It's fascinating. He breaks it down into two main parts. There's the small portion, which is what psychology mostly talks about.
Yeah.
Personal memories from this life, current personality traits, maybe even racial or ancestral camouflage memories, basically.
Yeah.
Stuff related to navigating this physical existence.
Right, the standard subconscious stuff. But then there's the other part.
Ah, the greater portion. This part belongs entirely to the inner world, according to Seth. This is the bit that acts as the receiving mechanism for those deep inner realities. It's a part that can reach far into the inner world itself, bringing back data that isn't limited by time or space, non-local information. It's like this untapped reservoir of simultaneous knowing.
So if you could learn to consciously access that greater portion, you're essentially tuning out the restricted radio station and tapping into the entire universal broadcast all at once. Understanding this must be why Seth can then just completely demolish our ideas of time and space.
That's the next big detonation in the session, absolutely. Seth states it point blank. Time and space are both camouflage patterns. They are the fundamental illusions that structure our physical experience.
It's hard enough wrapping your head around space being an illusion, maybe like a projection, but time. Our entire lives are built around past, present, future. How can that be just camouflage?
Well, Seth suggests we mistake motion and change for time. We see things move, things decay, things grow, and we map those changes onto a sequence, and we call that sequence time. He says that just like our outer sight seems to conquer distance or space, the inner senses and that greater part of the subconscious, they can do the same thing for what he calls inner space and what you would call inner time.
So the real kicker, the deep insight, is that nothing actually needs to be conquered, right?
No, exactly. Because for the mind and the inner senses operating in that uncamouflaged reality, there simply is no time and space to begin with. The insight is that nothing is conquered. The camouflage is simply not present.
Wow. That really implies the true reality is some kind of eternal now state. Everything exists. Everything happens simultaneously. We're just viewing that simultaneous reality through this narrow, time-bound slit in the camouflage curtain, forcing us to process it bit by bit, sequentially.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. Think of an old movie film reel. All the frames, the entire story, exist at once on that reel that's the eternal now. The projector bulb and lens, that's our physical consciousness, our outer senses, shines through only one frame at a time, forcing them to appear sequentially on the screen, creating the illusion of motion and time. The inner senses, though, they can perceive the whole reel at once. The outer senses just see the frame that's currently lit up.
That really makes our human obsession with clocks, calendars, history books, it feels almost quaint, sweetly arbitrary. Like we're meticulously measuring the length of a shadow cast by a light we don't even realize is always on.
Precisely. And because these ideas are so challenging, so utterly paradigm shifting, Seth actually dedicates a good chunk of this session explaining why he's being so careful, so deliberate in his communication, and also why he chose Jean and Rob, Joseph specifically. It becomes this kind of manifesto for intellectual rigor.
Oh yeah, this is one of the most memorable parts of the early stuff. It's funny, but deadly serious, too. He confirms, I am deliberately being deliberate. He points out he's using Jane's normal voice, her cadence, specifically so that this material is not considered any sort of mumbo-jumbo.
He is absolutely determined to separate this exploration of consciousness mechanics from any kind of, mystical fluff or cultish behavior. He just dismisses terms like spirit and medium and so forth, calling them flat out ridiculous.
He really wants this contact to be seen as a functional, maybe even natural process, not something religious or magical. The dry wit here is just priceless. He says he refuses to be compared with some long-bearded, beady-eyed spirit sitting on cloud nine.
It's a demand for intellectual honesty from the listener, isn't it? He's basically saying, look, this is the science of consciousness, not some spooky seance trick. And to underscore how serious he is about that, he explicitly refuses to perform any psychic tricks.
Right. He says he won't use circus tactics just to impress skeptics. No moving rings around, no throwing rocks, no tricks. The value, the validity has to rest entirely on the intellectual weight and coherence of the material itself.
And his criticism of the cults that inevitably spring up around phenomena like this is absolutely blistering. He makes a distinction between, say, a legitimate exercise of the inner senses, which is what a genuine seance should be, exploring inner reality and the organizations that get built around them.
He calls those resulting cults ludicrous and, in some cases, unforgivable demonstrations of stupidity by well-meaning but imbecilic personalities. Ouch. That's a really strong call for intellectual rigor. Approach these truths intelligently, or you risk just creating more superstition.
And he circles back again to how he makes contact. Through that larger portion of the subconscious, the part that bridges planes. He emphasizes it's a property of the mind, not the brain, and it's separate from Jane's personal memories or personality. This keeps the source of the material distinct.
Which leads perfectly into the big question. Why them? Why pick Jane and Rob for this monumental task? Seth's answer goes way beyond just liking them.
The number one reason he gives is their complete lack of prior affiliation. They are unaffiliated with any cult, religion, or particular school of thought. That was crucial. It meant they could receive the information relatively cleanly without immediately trying to force it into some pre-existing belief system or dogma.
They were a blank slate in that sense. He says they are open-minded, not fools, and not ready to cast me in the guise of pot-bellied Cupid, Buddha, God, saint, or devil.
And those qualities, Seth points out, are actually pretty hard to find, especially when you're dealing with material that fundamentally challenges the camouflage patterns of reality. He needed students who were sharp enough to follow the intricate concepts, but also humble enough not to immediately think they knew better or try to twist it to fit their own ego.
Fantastic setup. Okay, so the stage is set, the delivery method is justified, the nature of the camouflage pattern is understood. Now we can finally define the first actual inner sense he introduces.
Right. Seth starts by emphasizing that inner perception has this strong immediacy, a delicious intensity that the outer senses just don't have. That phrase, delicious intensity, really stands out, and he explains why. It's because there is no lapse of time in perception, since there is no time.
Ah, right. Because that time constraint, that need to process reality sequentially, frame by frame, it's just gone. The immediacy is built in because the information arrives all at once, in that eternal now.
Exactly. But then he gives a crucial warning. Inner realities do not simply parallel the outer senses. It's not like there's an inner sight that sees spiritual things, or an inner hearing for spirit voices. He says there is nothing to be seen, smelled, heard, or touched in the way we're used to physically. It's not just seeing different colors. It's a whole different category of perception.
Okay, this is where we definitely need that detailed analogy he provides. The man in the tree. It's a classic.
It really is. He starts simply with the familiar visual analogy.
Yeah.
A man is standing on a street corner. He sees a tree a block away. His physical sight easily spans that space. Simple enough.
Now comes the twist. He says, okay, now imagine that same man is blind and deaf. He can't see the tree, can't hear the car driving between him and the tree. The outer senses are offline for this. Seth then compares the physical objects between the man and the tree. The car, the sidewalk, the air, to points or distinctions within the inner world. The distance is no longer just spatial, it's an experiential, nonlinear kind of separation.
This thought experiment is the setup to introduce the first inner sense, which he labels inner vibrational touch.
And he even pauses to acknowledge this slightly awkward term, doesn't he? He says something like, I can only describe as inner vibrational touch. This is, if you will excuse the pun, touchy, which is pretty funny.
It is. So this sense involves immediate perception of a direct nature. It happens through this non-physical inner vibrational connection. This fulfills that requirement we talked about earlier. It has the immediacy of physical touch, but without needing any physical contact at all.
So if the man uses this inner vibrational touch to perceive the tree, what actually happens? What's the experience like? How is it different from just, say, psychically knowing the tree is there?
This is the really profound part. Seth says the man's consciousness wouldn't just detect the tree's location or form. His consciousness would actually expand to contain the experience of what it is like to be a tree, or the experience of the grass between him and the tree, or the curbstone. He would directly feel their basic sensations.
Whoa, wait, expand consciousness to contain the experience of being a tree. That's a complete dissolution of the usual self-author boundary we rely on.
Well, yes and no. It's more like communion without dissolution. Seth is very careful to clarify this critical point. The man would not lose consciousness of who he was. His own sense of self, his identity, remains intact. But simultaneously, he's experiencing the inner reality, the basic sensation of the tree or the grass. He perceives these other sensations in a way Maybe similar to how we perceive physical heat or cold directly, but without needing biological adaptation or losing our own perspective.
Hmm. That suggests our identity isn't rigidly defined by boundaries, but maybe more by our point of focus. The core self remains, but its focus, its awareness, can expand to envelop or tune into other seemingly separate units of consciousness, instantly perceiving their inner reality, their beingness.
That's a perfect way to understand it.
Yeah.
It's instantaneous, it doesn't distort the self or the other, and it's nonlinear. Inner vibrational touch allows for this incredibly deep empathy and understanding of the essential nature, the beingness of other aspects of consciousness, whether those aspects manifest as trees, rocks, animals, or even concepts in the camouflage world.
Okay, moving towards wrapping up this session's deep dive. This first look at the first inner sense really just sets the stage, doesn't it? There's clearly much more to come. Seth notes these inner senses are capable of expansion and focus in ways our outer senses just aren't. They can extend further into the depths of reality.
Yeah, and he leaves them with a bit of a cliffhanger. He promises to tackle that huge structural question in the next session. Where exactly is this inner world located on their plane? How does non-physical reality relate geographically or dimensionally to our physical space?
Although he does give us a massive clue right at the end that completely flips our usual metaphysical assumptions. It's not just that the inner world exists sort of alongside the outer world or maybe layered underneath it.
It's much more radical than that. The hint is that the inner world forms the outer world, and the outer world exists in it. The source reality, the vitality, the consciousness, the uncamouflaged stuff that's primary. Our physical plane is just a temporary, contained effect emerging from within that greater reality.
Which implies that studying the physical world alone, physics, chemistry, biology, is essentially studying the effect while remaining largely ignorant of the cause. And Seth clearly sees understanding this inner-outer relationship as a major evolutionary step for humanity.
Absolutely. He believes the species is heading towards critical breakthrough discoveries about inner reality. He suggests that understanding these inner senses, how they work, what their purpose is, will eventually allow you to utilize them much more effectively, fundamentally changing how we interact with and even shape the camouflage pattern itself.
He was so deliberate, often humorous, but incredibly detailed in laying all this groundwork, and he leaves them and us with one last wonderfully characteristic, almost chummy sign-off that just captures the whole feeling of this deep dive.
And now, my peachy friends, I will leave you with this plum of excellent material, though as usual I dislike saying goodbye. Just perfect.
A plum indeed. What a session, really focused entirely on digging into the machinery of reality that operates just beneath the surface we usually see. So, here's our final thought for you to maybe chew on this week. If the reality you experience is solid, stable, and sequential, the time, the space, the predictable path of things is actually just a camouflage pattern formed by a deeper, simultaneous, vital reality. What does that truly mean for the challenges or problems you might be facing right now? Are you perhaps spending all your energy trying to rearrange pieces within the illusion? Or could you start learning to access those mental enzymes, those inner senses, to potentially influence the underlying pattern itself?
Understanding that the mind is inherently uncamouflaged, as Seth says, that might be the crucial first step toward consciously utilizing that greater portion of the subconscious he described. For anyone wanting to really dig deeper into this, we can't recommend strongly enough. Get the Seth Material books, study them, wrestle with them, and visit the New Awareness Network website and their bookstore at https://sethcenter.com/early sessions for more resources.
Until next time, keep looking beneath the camouflage.